Hello, dear friends. This is Bob Hatton. This is The Encourager. Glad that you've joined me again today. You know, Martin Luther, he was a great German reformer. He wasn't just a reformer of the church, but he actually brought Europe out of the Middle Ages and brought them into modern times. And we are still feeling the effects of his influence right back from the 16th century. And he was a Bible student. He studied the Bible. He was a scholar. He could speak the biblical and understand the biblical languages. But he said about the prophets, he said, they are so difficult to understand. They speak within a strange language, and they seem to go from one subject to another. They skip to this and to that and to the other. It's very difficult to understand them. And you know something? Over the past few weeks and months, we've been looking at the first 17 books of the Bible, the first 17 books in the Old Testament. And these books are more or less history books. They're telling a story. They're a story about things that happened and what this person did and what that person said, and about how this people reacted to that and so on. And there's a story going on. There's a narrative that we can follow, and we've seen the ups and downs, especially of the nation of Israel, but also of other nations and of other people as well. But then we come to the next 5 books, and the next 5 books are the books of wisdom. We start with the book of Job, and then we go on to the Proverbs, then we go on to Psalms, and then Proverbs, and then to the Song of Songs, and then on to Ecclesiastes. The book of wisdom, where there's not very much story going on there, but there are things being said. There are poems, there are songs for us to read or sing, if you like. And they're a little bit difficult. They're not quite as easy as the stories for us to understand. But then we come on to the last 17 books, and they are the prophetic books. And this is quite something different. They speak in a very, I'm going to say a vivid language, but it's not really vivid. It's a very covert language with lots of pictures, and you need to have a very strong imagination to sometimes to think about what they're saying. They cover a number of different subjects. The first 3 of the prophetical books, they're very, very long. We've got Isaiah, and then Jeremiah, and then Ezekiel. They cover, Isaiah is 66 chapters. But then the last 10 books of the Bible are then what we call the minor prophets, and some are just 1 capital. Some are a few more capitals, but they're very short. In between there, we've also got the book of Daniel, which is also a really interesting book if you're thinking about the imaginary and the strange pictures that he sees. But they're in there for a purpose. We have the history books that tells us about what is happening. We have then these prophetical books, which are actually like a siren going off. They're a warning that God has got a plan. God wants to work with us people. God has got a plan. God has created us. And when he created us, he thought about something for us. But we've gone into rebellion. We've gone away from him. And the prophets are saying, if you keep on going your way, this way will have dire consequences. So come back to him. Join his plan. There is a cry to repent, to change our thinking, to turn around, to come to him and to get forgiveness. And again and again. And we see that these prophets, these different prophets, they are aimed at different people. We've got the book of Amos and the book of Hosea, and they are speaking especially to Israel, Israel being the northern part of the country, the northern kingdom. And they speak there, and Hosea, he has a very difficult life. He is a prophet of God, and his wife, God tells him, go and marry a prostitute. So he marries this woman, and he is a faithful husband, and she is having affairs with lots of different men. She's selling herself, and his actual life, his lifestyle is a prophetic word. It's saying God is the faithful husband who's looking for his wife, and his wife keeps going and having affairs with others, with other gods, following the strange gods. And then we have also the book of Jonah and Nahum, and they speak to Assyria, which at one time was the most mighty empire of that time, with its capital in Nineveh. Obadiah speaks to the Edomites, and the other prophets, they speak to Judah. And you know what has happened? They have filled the land with false gods. Their land is filled with idols. And before we start getting, holy righteousness feeling against these people, we've got to remember that it's easy to put idols into our hearts, to have other gods in our hearts, which in fact is what has happened here in our part of the world, where I'm living anyway. And in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 14 and verse 3, it warns us about the gods. The prophet warns us about the gods that we've installed in our hearts. And in Jeremiah 2 verse 3, Jeremiah tells us that we are to trust in the Lord, and we ought to trust only in him. But at the side of all these warnings, at the side of this siren going off, warning us to come back to God, there is also a promise. Actually, the promise starts in the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, and it goes through it. It's like a red line that goes all the way through the book, but especially in the prophets we find this. And it's the promise that God will send a person to help us find our way back to God. He will send a person who will bring reconciliation between man and God. And that's a person who we call the Messiah, the anointed one. And the Bible tells us, describes us exactly what he will be like. But it tells us about, what he will do, where he will come from, and so on. And in the coming days and weeks, we'll be having a look at this person. But I'd like to finish this morning with just sharing two Bible passages from you, from the prophets, from the prophet Isaiah, and that's chapter 45 and verse 22. And Isaiah writes there, he says, "Turn to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God, and there is no other." And then the other passage is from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 18 and verse 31 and 32. And there Ezekiel asks us, "Why will you die? For I," that's God, for I take no pleasure in the death of anyone, declares the sovereign Lord. Repent and live." And with this, I'm going to wish you a very good day. God bless you. I'll see you again. You're Bob Hatton, your encourager.